characterized as a bad decision, all bad decisions, this was the worst of all when I decided to become involved with drugs. And I became a heroin addict as a result of like being idle and not doing anything. And that led me ultimately to the decision that led me to prison and serving 48 years.
Big it up, big it up. Yep. Clear him up. Yeah. Here we go, go. Yeah. Here we go, go.
All right, welcome to Let's Talk Real with Mel. We've got Mr. Charles Hopkins here. I met Charles not that long ago, actually at church. He came to our church. But I'll let you introduce yourself, Charles. Tell us a little bit about yourself, you know, where you came from.
All right, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Mel, for having me and paying for the lift to get me here.
Right.
I never would have found it if I was driving. But as far as myself, I'm a 7-year-old. I'm recently released from prison. I've been out of prison 2 years. I was incarcerated 48 years and some change before I was released. I am currently staying in the District of Columbia. I work with a group called Voices for a Second Chance, and I'm a social activist. I'm really into the space of doing things and advocating for the disadvantaged and people that don't have, and try to provide them with information on how they can become more empowered. So that's basically where I am. And like I said, I thank you for having me. When we was in church, you told me that you offered me an invitation, and I didn't think it would be like this here. It's a very good organization that you have here, so I'm really excited to delve into the conversation.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming. Like I said, when I heard your story, it was amazing, and it touched me, you know, personally. And so I wanted to, and I think that your story deserves to be heard, and we have an audience that could definitely benefit from the journey, and you know, everything's not roses and rainbows.
That's right.
You know, and we sometimes learn more. I think we learn more when we have challenge than when things are easy.
I agree.
So if we could just, you know, let's talk real. We could just, you know, get to it. I mean, what were the circumstances? You said 48 years and change, almost 49 years. You were incarcerated. What were the circumstances that led to that?
And the circumstances that led to that, and a lot of bad decisions. And I always talk about this when I was going on speaking to bad decision. First bad decision I made was I dropped out of school. So then when I dropped out of school in the 10th grade. That was the first bad decision. I didn't have no marketable skills. I'm young, and I don't have no ability to gain income. The next bad decision I made was I signed up for Job Corps with the hope of like getting some kind of structure. And I knew my parents weren't gonna let me stay in that house without doing something. Their hope was that I would go back to school. I went to Job Corps. Next bad decision I made, I dropped out of Job Corps. I went to Job Corps, nice environment. Job Corps is everything it turned out to be. Give you a marketable skill, give you the ability to acquire the information and knowledge to be able to work. Dropped out of Job Corps.
And what year was that?
All this was in the 60s, 65, 66, and 67.
Was Job Corps still over at Blue Plains?
Nah, when the Job Corps back then, you had a choice where you could go, and I wound up in Breckenridge, Kentucky.
Okay.
So now mind you, I'm coming out of the District of Columbia. I've never been nowhere in my life. So I'm in Breckenridge, Kentucky. It was an old Army base, and it was a good facility. It was a good environment. Basically taught you auto mechanics, electronics, painting, home improvement, and things of this nature. Next bad decision I made when I dropped out of Job Corps, and this was the bad decision of all bad decisions. If it could be characterized as a bad decision, all bad decisions, this was the worst of all when I decided to become involved with drugs, and I became a heroin addict as a result of like being idle and not doing anything. And that led me ultimately to the decision that led me to prison and serving 48 years. I winded up, because I'm a heroin addict, I'm trying to get money. I'm trying to get money at all costs. And so ultimately I was on like a petty crime spree. And eventually I found myself, me and some other people, robbing a 7-Eleven, and the patron was killed. I was charged with it. I was found guilty of it, and I was sentenced to life in prison. And I did, and I was sentenced to life in prison in the Maryland system. And that was 1971 when I got arrested. 1973 when I got convicted, and 2019 when I was released.
Wow. So 71, 73, fast forward to 2019. So if we could kind of put a pin in that for a second, and I want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
You said you grew up in Southeast, right by where
Right.
my church is. Tell us about what that was like growing up.
Growing up
And that would have been in the
that
50s
and
the
60s, right? And growing up in Southeast Washington, I went to public school. I went to Turner Elementary. I went to Moulton Elementary. And I went to Douglas Junior High School before we moved out in Maryland. And growing up in Southeast, you don't really know that you don't have a lot, or that you're poor. When you're in a community where everybody pretty much the same, and that's not a determination on how you relate to each other. So we had a real sense of community in the area that I lived in, and I was never really a big guy, so I couldn't get. I wanted the paper where I couldn't get my own because my mother didn't think I would be able to handle it. So, but I always helped other people with their paper routes, and they would pay me, give me a stipend. In the environment, in the community in Southeast, the rec centers was the primary source of social activity. So the rec centers in the District of Columbia were like, everybody went to the rec center. Rec center had something to offer everybody. So I did a lot of networking with the rec center. When Marion Berry came into the District of Columbia and they started some job, one of my first jobs was the rec center. And it was in Parkland in Southeast. They had opened up a daycare for the Parkland children. And that was one of my first jobs. Went down there, I signed up for the Department of Recreation, and the Department of Recreation was doing this to provide service for the community. And so we cleaned up the area and created a daycare center. That was my first job I had, and it was my first source of income.
Mayor Berry's Summer Youth Program.
Mayor Berry, and to today it's still going on. And you got a lot of people that talk about how that created in them a sense of value about working. So Southeast was, you had to fight, you had to survive, but the reality was that you had a sense of community, and if you had a disagreement with somebody, y'all wound up fighting, that was the end of that. It didn't result in nobody getting killed, it didn't result in me going to get no gun and shooting nobody, and didn't result in no drive-by. It just resulted in
it was taken care of in that moment.
In that moment, take your licks and keep it moving. And it wasn't like you felt some kind of way that maybe I did get beat up. As long as I fought back. That was really the determining factor. The determining factor back then was, did you stand up for yourself? Not, did you go kill somebody in defense of a minor dispute? So.
Yeah, and I think that lesson, both of those, the sense of community that we had at that time, or that you had at that time, and even things have changed over the years. As the neighborhoods are more spread out. You see your neighbor. Maybe you wave, but you don't know your neighbor's names. But
right.
I know when I was younger, I was kind of right on the tail end, where if your neighbor saw you doing something, they would definitely tell your parents. And I'm sure by the time when my mom was little, and I'm sure when you were younger,
right.
the neighbor might actually even whip you too.
Oh yeah, and the thing about respect, and that comes with respect, because one, all the children in the neighborhood knew everybody's parents, and the parents in the neighborhood, they knew your situation. So if they know you hadn't eaten, or they know what's going on with your family, so they tell you, come on in and get something to eat. And it wasn't like that wasn't an uncommon thing. Another thing is that the parents in the neighborhood, if they seen you in a certain area that you didn't belong in, they would immediately chastise you. They knew, okay, you hang around older men, and they know these men that don't mean good in terms of what they're doing, but they also know that they're not going to force you to do something you don't want to do. So your attraction to them, they might tell you, boy, get away from here. But when you see the parent of them same people, and they come and say, It's a big difference because you know that parent, once she gonna beat you or he gonna beat you, then he gonna go home and tell your parents, and your parents gonna beat you.
Yeah,
So
you get it twice.
you had more fear of them, and more respect of them. So you automatically like you see them like, you know, one family in my neighborhood was the Dunmores. She had a lot of sons, and when you see Miss Dunmore, as soon as she sees, she call you by your name, or like the police. And we was talking about this the other day. Officer Friendly, they call them Officer Friendly now, but you had officers that was walked the beat, they walked that same neighborhood, they knew you. And it was crazy because they not only did they know you, but they'd ask you, say, who's your parents? You know, oh, my father was so-and-so. Oh, you so-and-so's son. And take you to the house because they had that kind of relationship in the neighborhood. So, you know.
At that time, there wasn't the same kind of fear of police that there are now,
Right.
so much because again, sense of community. Everyone was kind of working together, raising their family, raising their community together. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, so then you were working on the paper route, and then a point in time came where you decided, school wasn't for you. What was?
Well, and see what happened, and in the transition that we moved from D.C. to Maryland, and we moved from D.C. to Maryland. You know, this is the first time I ever experienced racism, because even though you see, institutional racism exists, but to experience it individually or in your face is a different thing. And when you're living in the projects and public housing, you insulated from like a lot of things going on around in the world. So, you very rarely did you see any white people in your neighborhood. You had a lot of people that were like of Jewish descent, and they primarily owned the businesses, but you didn't look at them no different than you. They did business, that's how they did things, and you understood that to be the case. But then when we moved out in Maryland,
where'd you go?
Moved out in Suitland, Maryland.
Okay.
And this was like right on the hill, this right before Dr. King was assassinated. Because Dr. King was assassinated and we're out there, and now it's a difference. I remember distinctly, I went to the store, and the guy, it was running the 7-Eleven, he asked me like, what are you doing in here? I'm like, I'm paying, I'm trying to get some candy. He said, well, hurry up and get your in ass out of here. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I felt some kind of way, which led me to ultimately go back down there and start stealing everything in the store, because that gave me an attitude, okay, oh, you got a problem with me, I got a problem with you. And so that right there caused me to ultimately drop out of school. Because when I went through the 9th grade, it was good. But when I got in the 10th grade, and you're in high school, now it's a little bit more rigid. And the teachers are a little bit more like direct and confrontational. And I remember distinctly one time we was in English class, and we had a spelling test. I didn't study for the spelling test, but this white girl behind me was giving me, pass me the words, and I was spelling, and the teacher must have knew. And instead of her saying like, calling me out in the hallway and she chastised me right in front of the class and did it in the most belligerent and hostile way, which caused me to respond in the most belligerent and hostile way. When she says, you're cheating, you don't know, you're dumb, and I said, okay, you right where I want you at right now. I said, man, like F you, and left. And that right there, that opened the door for when I went back and tell my mother and them. And mind you, I got 2 other sisters going to the same school. The one above me, she in everything. She's like the drill major. She done acclimated. I'm like, I'm hating this school. The one under me, me and her had the same attitude. Only difference is she wasn't as hostile. She didn't feel as hostile at the point I felt. Mm-hmm. So, and it's during the period where you had like a lot of civil rights and racial unrest, and Dr. King get killed. Now it's a different story. So that led me to drop out of school.
What school was that in Maryland?
That was Suitland Senior High School.
Suitland High School. Okay.
Yep,
so right on Silver Hill Road. I don't know if were they still on Silver Hill Road then?
Yep. And I rode by. I rode by it a couple of times, and when you look at how it's changed, but back then it was remember they had busing, you had, all that stuff was going on. So the Civil Rights Bill passed. Now you have to go, schools have to be integrated. And a lot of schools didn't want to be integrated. Suitland was already integrated, but it was segregated in terms of the administration. They didn't, you had a lot of, like I said, a lot of racism. So that ultimately led me to I couldn't make the adjustment. And it wasn't that, you had other black kids and minorities and people of color that made the adjustment. I just couldn't make the adjustment. Mentally, I couldn't make the adjustment. And not making the adjustment mentally had a lot to do with, one, I didn't want to be out there. I wanted to go to go to vocational school. I knew I was getting ready, I was in 9th grade. I knew ultimately I was going to, be in high school. And I wanted to go to a vocational school. Back then they had Chambers Vocational School over there off of Pennsylvania Avenue. I wanted to go there. But when I got out here, they had Crossland Senior High, was the premier vocational school. And we took a trip out there one time. And the floors were so clean. And now, in comparison to what it looked like now, the grass was manicured, the floors were clean. And we went in there, and it was vocational school. And everything in there was lily white. So I didn't even feel like that, even if I could get in there, I would be able to get in there. And the instructors, they pretty much was like talking to everybody but us. So, that shaped my thinking. That ultimately led me into making more bad decisions.
Okay, so but it sounds like the real precipice of the real reason that you actually had all this friction happen when you were kind of uprooted, good, bad, ugly, out of the community which you knew and were raised in Parkland, Southeast, and then going into Suitland.
Right, and that's really the genesis of it, and not being prepared mentally. Like I said, we're moving. My father, we got a house, we got grass, we got a fence, we got we got like we starting to become a middle class lifestyle, and so really I should have been jumping for joy, but because of you in the suburb and you don't have the same sense of community, and everything is distance. And when I start networking with people of your own color, then they're upwardly mobile. So you're looking at like people that's like more affluent. I didn't have no issue with that. It was just that I couldn't adjust to the racism that existed, and not being equipped, because this is new. And so now once I become confrontational, then now I'm going to become predatory.
Yeah. So now if we kind of bring us back into, so we went to Kentucky, we left, then we came back this way, and then ultimately we had a battle with addiction.
Right, and see, and that's a good segue, because we're talking about, like, when I come back into the District of Columbia, it's in the 70s, and the drug addiction epidemic in the District of Columbia and in the nation is bad. When you look at the American Gangster, Frank Matthews, when you look at that story, you put that story into the reality of the country. And, he talking about selling blue magic, but a lot of people on the East Coast was getting drugs from there. And then now, drugs is like heavily into the community. And I remember my first encounter. I ran across a guy. I was going down to my sister's house. I ran across a guy that was in Job Corps with me. And he told me, he said, man, we the first time I seen him since I've been out, we both have seen each other. And we, talking about Job Corps. Both of us dropped out of Job Corps. And he was saying, like, so I'm asking what he doing. He say, man, I'm selling drugs. I don't know nothing about what that is. I'm like, selling drugs? He said, yeah, I got dollar pills. So I said, dollar, and I'm trying to get all the ins and outs of it, right? He said, yeah, he showed them to me, right? I said, well, give me 5 of them, right? And then they in capsules, so I'm thinking you swallow them. But I don't know, so when I get to where I'm going at, bring it to my brother-in-law's attention, who unbeknownst to me at the time was a drug addict and was using. And I say, look, this is what the guy gave me, right? And so he showed me how to, snort it. that opened the door up for. Now I'm in an environment that, okay, all the depression, all the things going on with me, I got something that can make me feel comfortable with that. I got something that can make me feel a sense of like security. In the NA literature, they say, this is one of the things I remember this, I went through the NA, they say through our inability to accept personal responsibility, we slowly commit suicide. And that's what felt good with me. I didn't have to take personal responsibility for none of the decisions I made. I could go ahead and just go right here and find the comfort.
And everything would be,
everything is
comfortable.
good. Everything is good. My inability to accept personal responsibility. And that's what, and now, but, don't nobody tell you, and like we talk about, why people do what they do, but don't nobody, when it comes to drugs, don't nobody tell you, say like, oh yeah, here go a manual on how to use PCP. Here go a manual on how to use fentanyl. Here go a manual on ecstasy, love boat. So here, when you do this, remember, go to page 10, and page 10 gonna tell you what's gonna happen to you. So before you do it, go to page 10 first and see.
Yeah, if page 10, they wouldn't.
You wouldn't do it. Yeah,
give the book back.
Yeah, give the book back. Say, yeah, take this back
Right.
and take the
it all
book
back.
Yeah,
right.
take it all back. But don't. It's not that kind of situation. It's a disease, and I fell victim of it, and I enjoyed it, and I thank God, by the grace of God, I don't use it today, but it's only because I choose to follow the things that I understand about that. But that's what led, when in the disease, it led me to like do things that don't take personal responsibility. Don't have no money, take somebody's money. Don't take personal responsibility for not having money. Have it, I had jobs. I had jobs in the course of that period. In the course of the 70s, when I got out of job corps, the District of Columbia was friendly to like people like myself that didn't have jobs. We had a lot of programs, so I got in programs. But once I became addicted, I didn't have the ability to maintain no job because my drug addiction was priority.
Yeah, and that took over.
That took over.
Took precedent.
That
That was the most
everything.
important thing
Yeah.
going on at the time. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then, we fast forward a little bit, a point in time came where we got sentenced. You said this was 73?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And this was on the heels of me committing a crime, armed robbery and murder. And I killed somebody in the course of trying to get some money. And it was 3 of us. And the amount of money we got out of there, it wasn't enough. It was $27 from the store. I wound up getting life sentence and doing 48 years for that decision. And the most damaging thing about that decision was I took somebody's life. And I could never take that back. I could never reverse that. And I did that. I intended to do it, but once you make a decision to go somewhere with a gun, the consequences of that decision to carry a gun, whatever happened after that, that's the decision you made when you picked up the gun to go do something, to carry it, wherever you carry that. If I make a decision to get in the car and put an illegal weapon on me and drive around, the consequences that come out of that was made on that decision to put that on. So if I get road rage and I blow somebody's brain out, I made a decision to get a gun to go do, not to go do something, but the consequences.
Yeah, the decision was made earlier. It wasn't in that moment.
Right,
It was already in the works.
It's already in the works, and that's what happened. So, and I don't look at it. I could be labeled or bemoan rather the fact that I did all that time. I could bemoan that I missed a lot of opportunity. But the reality is, I came out a better person than I went in. Because had I not been sentenced, I'd have been dead in the alley somewhere. Because I wasn't changing. I wasn't changing my thinking. I wasn't looking for help. I was looking to get worse. I was looking for more drugs. I was looking for more insanity, as they call it. They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That was me. So I was expecting, I'm going to keep on doing the same thing over and over again. Hey, I ain't really care about the results as long as it aided me in my disease.
Yeah. So so in that changed. So if that brings us to, what was it that changed? Because obviously, you're clean, you're working, you've got a place, you've got a car, you're doing, and you've been home 2 years. What was it that changed? And that was it when did you change when you came home? Did that process of change start?
And you know what? And that's a good question, because the process started immediately when I got arrested. Because then I knew I knew I was in deep water. So I already knew that I wasn't, the chance of me coming home like the next day was slim to none. And I said that what got me here is not gonna get me out. Cause now I'm not giving up on getting out. I already knew that my situation was bad. And I knew the deck was stacked against me in the sense of me being in an environment that I had no control over. I ain't had no control over the courts. I ain't had no control over not having money to pay for a lawyer. I ain't had no control over none of those things. So I knew what I did have control over was changing the way I thought. And that's what the change came. It came immediately. It was like instantaneously. Because I knew, I said, man, this not me. And as much as I was enjoying the insanity or wallowing in misery, I wasn't. I wanted to get out. I just knew couldn't get out. And it's the grips of addiction. And that's what I was in. And once that grip loosened up because of my incarceration and arrest, I started looking at myself and started doing some introspection, which led me to start educating myself. I think I said it when I was in church. I had a 8th grade education, and I had like maybe about a 5th grade reading level. So I started doing those things. Everything I needed to do to better myself, I started doing it, which opened the door for me to start networking with people that was also doing those things, and finding people that wanted me to do those things.
Right. We say all the time the best way to change our situation is to change our environment. Mm-hmm. So your environment, even though within the institution, changed because you started associating with folks that were reading, that were getting more educated, folks that were saved.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
So tell us a little bit about that journey of of finding Jesus.
And the interesting thing about that is when I came in the prison system, I was everything. I was a member of Black Panther Party. We had a collective group in there. I was a part of that. I became a Muslim. I was that. I was looking for identity again. I'm looking for, and this is what this all boiled down to. I'm looking for an identity, somewhere I can be comfortable. And it was only in 2017 when this decision came down in the court. They said everybody arrested between 1970 and 1980 had to get a new trial because the way they was instructing our juries, it was unconstitutional. And so everybody was given a new trial, and I was given one as well. And I left from the Maryland prison system and went to Upper Marlboro County Detention Center. Okay. That's where I went at. I went up there in lieu of a new trial. And now I'm in an environment that nobody know me. In the Maryland prison system, I'm known by everybody. I can't go to no prison in the Maryland prison system that don't nobody know me, because I'm always doing activities. I'm always sponsoring. I'm always got something going on, like involving the population and socializing, getting programmed. I'm real heavy on that. When I get up to Marlboro, don't nobody know me. So while I'm there, I'm like, okay, I know I'm getting ready to come home. I'm thinking about what I need to do. So I need to get a place. I'm starting like look at these things.
It's happening.
Yeah, it's real. It's real.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what kept on annoying, like nagging at me. Those things, because they had certain resources that I had already tapped into, so I already knew I could say, okay, I can go here and I can do this. What was nagging at me was I ain't had no spiritual foundation. And it was like nagging at me. Okay, then what? Okay, you get out, now what? And one of my cell buddies was talking about, yeah, man, they had a prayer circle down here, and they, I said, yeah. So I remember this distinctly. I went around the corner, and we was in the section 16. And this is a section where everybody come in Marlboro. You come in literally as you are. some guys still on boat, you know, stinking, you know, homeless. I mean, like, this is like,
Intake.
yeah, it's the worst of the worst. And when I went around the corner, the guy was calling prayer circles. Prayer circles. He walked around in the unit, prayer circle. When I got around the corner, it was like about 40 people in the circle. And I'm looking, and they beat up, and they battered. They like the ones that was on when Jesus fed. They were like that. They was like the worst of the worst. But they was in this circle, and the guy was telling me, man, you know, whatever going on with you, just talk about it, you know. God love you. And I was in awe, because you could hear the sincerity in these people, and it didn't have nothing to do with what they're gonna do when they leave, but it was an opportunity for them at that time to talk about what was going on with them. And like maybe a few weeks later, I converted. And when I converted, I said, you know what? I tried everything else. I'm gonna try this, and no matter what, I must always stay in the presence of the Lord. And that's been my mantra. No matter what, coming and going. I'm always like, thank you, God, thank you, Jesus, coming and going. Yesterday, I've been doing a speaking engagement, so I hadn't been to church at my church in a while. And I said, oh, I'm going to church today. And when I got up, everything was on that. And the pastor's son had called me and was asking me, he said, man, you know, I want you to read something. You gonna be? I said, yeah, I'm gonna be there, because if I don't have no prior engagement, if something not holding, and I'm going there, and I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do in that regard, because I gotta be thankful. It's only by God's grace that I'm where I'm at today. It's only by God's grace that I can meet a male. It's only by God's grace that I can come up to a building like this. You know, if it wasn't for God's grace and mercy, I was up in the maximum security prison in Cumberland. The only thing that was gonna come to my door in terms of me being free was a body bag, because I was gonna ultimately die from being in prison. It wasn't, that's just inevitable. Health, you know, how many other years, but that's what's gonna be how we're gonna get out. It's only by God's grace that I walked out. So yeah, I'm forever thankful.
Yeah, and I think the shift in mindset from being arrested and then just being open to something different. I think we talk oftentimes about being in a constant state of learning, and you know, I think the moment we feel like we know everything, and we stop learning, or we close the door to learning and taking in new experiences, that's when we start dying, I think, on the inside a little bit. Slowly.
And the thing about that is when the only way you're gonna survive any type of hardship, any type of difficulty, is you gotta think. You know, you gotta have a mindset. You know, even if a person is terminal, they can go like, just shut down. I don't want this no more. Or they can say, you know what, I'm good, I'm thankful, and I'm gonna live each day as if, you know, it's the most wonderful day in my life. You'll see the difference. I remember my uncle, and you know, my uncle passed away, and he had cancer. And I said, man, I heard, when I talked to him, I said, man, I heard you, you know, like, he said, man, I'm good. You know, I'm not, you know, and I was like, and it made sense, and that's the attitude I took. I'm not gonna do what I did before, so I'm gonna try to take value in everything I do, put value in everything, and my thinking, always educate myself, always learning, always being open to hearing, you know, new ideas, and that's really what got me over in the long run.
Yeah, so being that learning mindset, and again, like I said, one of my mentors tell me you can complain about your resources, complain about your situation, or you can be resourceful. And you've been very resourceful. So now so you come home, tell us what that was like, that experience.
And that experience, you know, like when they release you, they normally release you from one place, but they change, so they released me from the reception center in Baltimore. Okay. And I'm calling my family, telling them that they know I'm getting ready to get out, but I want to make sure they, they connect. They wouldn't let me make the collect call. So I'm out in Baltimore, and it's like 6 o'clock at night, and all I'm thinking about is how do I get back to Washington? So they gave me $50, and I'm looking around, cause now I say I gotta try to get a call. If I can call my family, I can tell them where I'm at. Then I can go somewhere and like, I know the area not that safe when the sun go down. I already know that. Then I can go somewhere where I know a little bit more lit, right? So I see a gentleman come off the bus. I said, man, look, I see him with the phone. I said, look, man, he said, man, I'm gonna get on the bus, right? And I see an elderly woman come off the bus. I said, look, miss, I got $50. I've been locked up 48 years. I'm gonna give you 25 of these dollars. I just need to make a call. And I heard somebody call me. It was my family members. And so that's how I wound up back. And it didn't occur to me that I was home and I was out until we got to the house. And when we got to the house, that's when it occurred to me. And the weight of the world like just fell off me. And I always started crying. And it was a joyous occasion. 6 months after being out, one of my family members, I was staying with, told me I had to leave. So I wound up homeless. And in that 6 months of wind up homeless, I was doing some networking. I got, with Samaritan Ministry, the Strive program, which teaches, taught me social skills and how to like navigate, the environment. So I was equipped with understanding certain things.
Yeah, because you're a Strive program graduate.
I was a Strive program graduate. So it equipped me with like the social skills to be able to interact and understand difficult situations from a societal point of view. I ain't got to revert back to the prison mentality. When in prison, it's a problem, it's confrontational. There's no such thing as a problem that's not confrontational. It's how it escalates determines how confrontational it is,
But everything's a conflict.
Everything's got that. So you like, I'm in commissary line, you get in front of me, it's a problem. How much of a problem it's gonna be determines where it go from there. Put food on your tray, you don't like the way you put it on it, it's a problem. So it showed me how to look at things from a society perspective and allowed me to be in that space when I found myself homeless. So instead of all woe is me and pity party, I started like looking at the real estate. I'm looking to see what I gotta do, contacting people, networking. They put me I got wind up in a shelter called the Nehemiah Project that gave me a sense of security. I was able to breathe. I knew I was in a safe environment. It was a shelter. I ain't like it, but it wasn't no problem.
Right, it was safe.
It was safe. It was safe and clean. And the guy that ran it was a Christian. So that's where he was at. You ain't had to be a Christian to be in there, but he was, and I am. So we had a lot in common in that regard. And ultimately, I got a job. I graduated. I went to Georgetown. Georgetown had a program called Pivot to teach you entrepreneur skills. I went there, finished that, got a job, had saved my money, and was networking with all the social service agencies. When somebody called me and asked me that I wanted a place to stay for low-income seniors, wound up getting that. I've been there 2 years. I just recently bought a car. They had little minor problems, but I just recently bought a car like last month. And my philosophy is, and it's for the benefit for all your listeners, I don't make no bills I can't pay. If I make it, I'm gonna be able to pay it. So if I can't pay it, I don't care what it is, I'm not gonna get it, because that type of pressure. I don't want to find myself in a position where, the adage, rob Peter to pay Paul. I ain't robbing nobody to pay nobody. So.
That's good stuff. So how did you come across Samaritan Ministries? They got you in the Strive program.
And the Samaritan Ministries, the thing about that was they got in the District of Columbia, they do a lot of networking. So they sent out this app. They say, do you want to be linked to all the services that's available for you? And I said, yeah. So when I signed up for it, Samaritan Ministries was a part of that, was in that network. And I seen it they say, do you want $125 for participating in this program? So I'm thinking, okay, that's easy, man. I'll go there, get in the program, sit for a couple of hours, go collect my money. No, you had to sit for like 4 weeks. And in the 4 weeks process, they critical thinking. They taught you critical thinking. They taught you how to do a resume. They taught you how to interview. They taught you how to interact with people. They taught you, how to stay centered in terms of when things come up. Don't make that like a nuclear. Don't make it like, oh, well, it's a problem. Don't make it a nuclear problem. Just look at it in the context that it's in. That everybody has problems.
Like a vicissitude. We talk just a little bump, just
Yeah.
a challenge.
And take it in stride, right? And that's how I wind up getting with them. And I graduated, and I credit them with helping me develop the social skills, the initial social skills I needed. Because COVID hit right after I got put out. COVID hit right during that process. So it's at the height of COVID. Everybody remember COVID. The entire nation was shut down, and everything was structured. Everything was like you couldn't go places, you couldn't do certain things, and you had to be in the house by a certain time. Wasn't a whole lot of moving around, but for me, I was in a comfortable environment, like a controlled environment. So I was comfortable with it, and I was learning how to utilize the computer. I was becoming more proficient in doing things online because everything was online, and I was working, and I was in the District of Columbia, and where I was working at, public transportation got me there and got me back. I was really focused on like really saving money, and I was thinking because of Pivot, Samaritan Man, I was always thinking that I gotta pay bills, so the money I'm getting, don't take the money as money because I'm not paying no rent where I'm at. Take the money as if you're paying bills. So I'm always
save it.
That's right. So I'm saying, okay, eventually I'm going to have to pay rent. Eventually I'm going to pay phone bill. Eventually I'm going to have to pay this. Eventually I'm going to pay that. I was getting EBT card, which is called food stamp. I was getting that. So I said, okay, I got money. Just go buy. No, I'm budgeting. So.
All right, and so then you went through the Samaritan Ministries program. You graduated through the Stride program. You got employment. You got housing. You got a vehicle. But a lot of folks, after that long journey that you had, after that long journey, and then you have another minor setback. A lot of folks would have quit at that point. You became homeless. A lot of folks would have said, you know what? This isn't, and it would have been very, very easy to revert back. What was it that kind of kept you going? What was it that really made you say, you know what? No, I'm not quitting. I'm not going back. I'm going to keep going on my plan.
And I'm gonna say one word: Jesus. I can take claim for everything, but I can't take claim for that. God's grace and God's mercy. And when I told you, when I left, I said, no matter what, I'm always going to stay in the presence of the Lord. And so that became my mantra. So that's where I went at. So even in the troubled time, and I trusted the process. I believed. I said, okay, you say you got me. You say I'm your child. Okay. Well, here go your child needing help. Here go your child being homeless. Here go your child struggling. Here go your child frustrated. Here go your child having problems. Here go your child having doubt about in your face. I'm telling you these things about me. So now tell me what to do. Show me where to go. And everything was just, look, stay the course. Because I wasn't, I'm in an environment where they're using drugs. I'm just not like a, but at the same time, I said, you know what? I'm gonna stay right here. Because I set up this thing I'm doing. I'm gonna stay right here. It's paying, I'm getting paid for doing it. And I'm comfortable with that. I got a certain discipline. I'm gonna hold on to that. I learned that from being incarcerated. One thing you learn from being in prison is adjusting. You're gonna adjust in prison, because they're gonna move you from one cell to another. You're gonna adjust.
You're gonna have to.
You're gonna have to. If you,
Right.
you ain't got no come to your cell and say, look, pack up, you moving. Well, I've been here for, hey, you moving, you're moving. Where you want to move? You want to go to the cell we got planned for
Or
you?
to the hole, right?
Yeah, but you're moving.
Right.
And so that's what it was, And I know that sounds like a cliche, and I know that like a lot of people, have faith, and some people don't. But it was just that simple. I chose to trust in God. I chose to believe that God got me. I chose to accept whatever was going on with me as God saying that's what's going on with me. Couldn't have been worse than the 48 years. It's not. I ain't got a place to stay. I'm in a shelter. Not worse than waking up and them not opening the doors up for like 9 months. You know, not worse than that. Not worse than coming out of the cell with a knife on you and the possibility of having a confrontation. Not worse than being stabbed, which I was. Not worse than that. Not worse than being stomped half to death. I was. Not worse than that. This right here is controllable and manageable. I'm in a shelter. And everybody mind their business. The only way it become a problem is by getting your business. And I'm not getting my motto was 6 months minding my business and 6 months leaving the next man's alone. So I was in a good space.
Right.
Yeah, so so that's but I trusted and I believe, and even to the day I trust and believe. I don't, when I went and got the car, I saved up for the car. I said I ain't gonna want no note. And I went there with a certain amount of money I was gonna spend, and I got the vehicle that I wanted. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't had no driving experience, and I daggone near killed myself like 20 times driving. But I trusted that. Mm-hmm. But I trusted that God wasn't gonna let me be the bumper.
Not gonna let you come this far.
Yeah,
right.
be the bumper on the tractor trailer.
Right. Right. Can't come this far to take you out.
And I trust it, and I believe, and I make it, in the liberty of it. But the reality is that that's what I did, and that's what I chose. It might not be for somebody else, and I don't tell you that. I'm saying for me, when you ask me what it was, that's what it was, and that's what it is, and that's what it's gonna always be. I'm not gonna never go back to not trusting. I'm not gonna never. And we our families and our parents, they tell us that, and and when we're young, we don't care about that. We don't think about that. But then when you see the reality that I know that I'm only here because of by God's grace. I can't. Ain't nothing else that can say that. Ain't nobody else can tell me that. I'm 70 years old. Mm-hmm. I could be a babbling maniac right about now. And I've known people that got out this, they couldn't make the adjustment mentally and went right back. I mean, immediately because they couldn't make the adjustment, and they're comfortable in that environment. I'm not. I'm thankful to be able to wake up and go to the icebox and eat what I want to eat. I'm thankful for somebody that wanted me to come on the show and talk to them. I'm thankful for these things. I don't take these things for granted.
Well, you're an inspiration. I mean, and that brings me to the quote of the day by Newt Gingrich, who said, "Perseverance is the hard work you do after you get tired of doing the work you already did." And so that's perseverance. And you're an inspiration to not letting the circumstances define you. Right. And even though there were some circumstances that got you in those circumstances, you were able to push through, persevere, and now you're on speaking tours, you're talking at churches, you're doing other speaking events. How would folks get a hold of you if they wanted to reach you?
And you can reach me with my email, ckhopkins, 4 @gmail.com.
Okay, ckhopkins4 at
gmail.com.
Okay, and then if you could just, and I know you're working with several nonprofits now. What are some of the areas of focus that you're working on now? I know you're big in community activism and things. What are some of your pet projects right now?
Right now, my pet project is I'm doing a podcast called Rattling the Bars, and it has a social agenda. That's my pet peeve, because it highlights a lot of things going on with people in the social setting. And I work, but my primary source of income is an organization called Voices for a Second Chance. It's in District of Columbia and deal with helping men and women coming home and giving them the resources that they need. But more importantly, the majority of people that work there are returning citizens, much like myself. And so when a person sits across from us, we can identify with them and we can understand them. And we know how to get them to stay focused, to be like me, because a lot of the people in that spaces, just like went through some similar things I went through, they worked there and was able to overcome. And so that's really one of my pet peeves. And just being in the church, and doing things with the church. We was talking off camera, and I'm motivated to do some other things with the church. because I think, and I really believe, and I'll close on this point, I really believe that if, we can get people to get a spiritual foundation and be comfortable with it and trust it, they'll overcome a lot of things. Society will change because I'll trust the Lord, or I'll trust whatever spirituality I'm in, as opposed to, like you say, letting conditions define me, and then letting the hardship become the problem, and letting the hardship become everything that I look at, as opposed to saying, well, it's a light at the end of the tunnel. God said about the rainbow. It's a reminder that I'm always with you.
Yeah, focus on the light. Focus on the happy place.
Yeah.
Not focus on the problem.
Right, because you always going, you're going to have problems. If it wasn't, then how would we know, our strengths? So, but it's how you deal with them and how you engage them.
Right. Well, you're an inspiration to me, and I'm sure I know you're an inspiration to others, and you're changing lives. And I think the biggest thing is that not only did you change, but now you're affecting the lives of hundreds of other people, potentially thousands of other people, with your projects and they're returning citizens and helping them get placed in society and acclimated. So I appreciate you, and yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for
Charles, for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, Mel.
All right.
What do you say? Let's talk real with Mel.
Yeah.
Or we just talk real.
Yeah. All right.
Big it up, big it up.